Kia ora, kia orana, and talofa lava. My name is Alistar Kata, contributing editor to Pacific Media Centre's Pacific Media Watch project. On behalf of the Pacific Cooperation Foundation and PMC, I spent 2 weeks in Apia, Samoa, working with the local media. And of course, my trip just happened to coincide with the big Manu Samoa All Blacks clash, where I have to say the people of Samoa really turned out for. Even on the way there, All Blacks fans decked with their gears and memorabilia talked about nothing but the game and their predictions of the outcome. But no one could have predicted that score, and nothing could have prepared me for the craziness of the local rugby fans. But first, I have to say what an absolute pleasure it was working with the local journalists. I had a few days with the Samoa Observer, the only daily newspaper and the largest newspaper group in Samoa. And as expected, the rugby and Manu Samoa stories took precedence for the time I was there, but it wasn't all about the rugby. While I was there, the Parliament passed legislation to establish a media council. While some journalists I spoke to agreed and felt they needed some sort of body to be held accountable to, others were completely against it. So it'll be an interesting few months watching what happens there with the Samoa Media Council once it's endorsed by the head of state. I also worked with the hardest working team I have ever met, the crew at TV1. Most of their team were away in Papua New Guinea covering the Pacific Games, so the extra hours and effort they put into their work was so admirable. With them, I covered the recognised Seasonal Employer Conference, the first time it had been hosted in an RSC partner nation. The RSC scheme brings workers from around the Pacific to work in the horticultural and viticultural industries in New Zealand. Prime Minister Tuilaepa was straightforward in asking that the cap for how many workers are allowed into New Zealand to be removed, to which the New Zealand Minister of Immigration, Michael Woodhouse, responded that the cap will be reviewed. I also had the chance to work with the Samoa Press Secretariat. This was a thrilling experience because we basically followed Prime Minister Tuilaepa wherever he went, and he was a very busy man in the few days leading up to the game. There was the signing of the double tax agreement along with New Zealand's Prime Minister John Key, furthering the trade and investment between the two countries, and that will come into play later this year. The game was seen as also a diplomatic opportunity, with Key bringing a delegation of ministers with him. Peter Dunn, Suwa William Seo, Winston Peters, Andrew Little and a few others were there, so there was a whole other diplomatic side to the game. Every opportunity was taken. Not only were we the Prime Minister's shadows, but we followed the superstars of the week, the Manu Samoa team and the All Blacks. From being there, I realised how important this match was to the rugby fans and also to just Samoans in general, whether they were there for the game or elsewhere. It was history in the making, the first time the All Blacks had been there, so the significance of the event didn't really hit me until then. We were there when the All Blacks were at the head of state, officially welcomed in an ava ceremony, and when both teams had their captain runs, and then to the parade in the centre of Apia, and this was definitely the place to be. Thousands of people lined the streets as both teams made their way to the centre, and it's an indescribable feeling being amongst the crowds and watching the whole country come to life. John Campbell was there, and international media were vying for those perfect shots, so it was a truly you had to be there experience. I'm not going to talk about the game itself because we all know what happened, and even though Manu Samoa didn't come away with the win, it didn't matter. The experience was everything. It's difficult to put into words the experience of working with the local media in Samoa, and possibly one of the most exciting times in the country's history. The locals were literally breathing rugby, and it was awesome to see such passionate characters thrilled over something that is so familiar to us back home. But the whole experience for me was more than just the game. The highlight of the trip was definitely the people I met. I was the most fortunate person, having met and worked alongside the local media. Their perseverance and diligent work ethic put some of the journalists here in New Zealand to shame. They care about their work, and because their community is so localised, everything matters. Each newsroom I went to, I was welcomed with open arms. And the main point that stands out for me about the local media is this sort of family environment that they create in their newsrooms. Although there is the odd tussle or war of words, there's no competitiveness or friction there. Everybody is there for the same purpose and they all help each other out. It's a sort of we're all in this together feel. The reporters also work under some constraints in terms of the equipment and technology available to them, and although their industry is not as advanced as the systems in other Pacific countries, they get the job done without complaint or qualm. It was such an education for me to see and experience with them working in that way. I will take away so many lessons from this trip, but the most important lesson would be that I gained a wider understanding of the journalist I want to be. The Pacific region is an area that is at most times misunderstood, at least in the mainstream media in New Zealand. This experience has nailed home for me the importance of being a reporter that builds understanding and gives an accurate expression of who these Pacific people are and what matters to them. I'm so thankful for the opportunity I had working in Samoa and will definitely make plans to go back. Special thanks goes to the Pacific Cooperation Foundation, to Ralph and Mac and their team. Also to the beautiful people who made this trip so much more. Misa Vicky Lepole, my amazing coordinator, Matafa and the girls at The Observer, Ame, Renatia Rivers, and Marita Hooch, Yutita Anetalea, Le Sapungi Leawanai, Christian Aiono and the team at TV1. Thank you, whawhetai te le lava.